Hey, John. How are you? Thank you for your time today. This is our next conversation with John from Stoel Rives. He's the Chief Information Security Officer there. My name is Rama Balasubramanian, and I do this podcast series on behalf of the Society for Information Management here at Portland. In Yeah, this is as part of the education committee. We try to do these kind of speak with leaders kind of podcast series where we try to learn about their career paths, their career journeys, what worked for them, what didn't work for them, things like that. And we have the good fortune here of speaking to Jon Washburn from Stoel Rives today. John, would you mind introducing yourself and giving some more background?
Sure. So I'm Jon Washburn. I'm here in Portland. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Stoel Rives. I've been in that role for probably 2.5 years, but I've been doing security there since I started in 2011. I've held the security officer title as part of my job description for about 9 years, but it just became a formal full-time thing a little under 3 years ago. In addition to Stoel Rives, I also am on the executive committee for the Legal Services Information Sharing and Analysis Organization, or LSISO. I'm also on another number of committees with ILTA, the International Legal Technology Association. And then I also am on a few other, committees, whatever, around here. I'm sure most of you have met me at some event or other in Portland. I also did security as part of my role as a network manager when I was in New York at another law firm. Pretty much anyone who's been in networking or server administration or anything like that has been really doing security for a long time. It's just become a more full-time position in the last probably 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, that's accurate. I mean, back when it's about 10 years ago now, I used to be working for the CISO at Columbia University, and I was managing the identity and access management department, and my colleagues there were from networking, and they're like, oh, we've been doing IT security for years now, so it just became a formal stream or a formal practice in the past 10 years or so. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So, John, how long have you been in technology, and what kind of brought you to technology, or did you just start your career in technology?
No, so when I was a kid, my dad was an engineer. He was self-taught, never went to school. He learned some engineering when he was in the Air Force for a while, and he had worked on UNIVAC, which was one of the early tube computers. Yeah. So in the early 80s, he figured out, computers are going to take over engineering, personal computers. I better get back into computers. So he went and bought an old 8086 computer. Well, it was new then. It's old now. The cool feature, it had two 5.25 inch floppy drives, so I could dupe drives when I was a kid. So my dad told us, me and my brother, if we learned computers, we could do some work for him on the weekends and he'd pay us. So we both taught ourselves how to use AutoCAD 3 when we were kids. And we would help my dad mark up plans and stuff like that. And so we really got into computers. My brother does really high-end CAD design for a piping company, went through the math program at PSU. I ended up going to college and deciding I was going to do public relations. I got away from computers for a bit. And then when I got out of school, I was like, I can't do that much with my liberal arts degree. So I ended up working in an engineering company doing AutoCAD after doing a little bit for my dad. And while I was there, they had an old distributed print system that was a piece of junk. And someone asked me, like, what should we do about this? Should we hire these guys at this local internet service provider, which was kind of a new thing then in the 90s? And they had this old server that they never put together on the floor. And I said, you know what, just give me the manuals, I'll figure it out. And so I went, wired the whole office through the suspended ceiling, set up the server, Windows 3.1.1. I replaced the BNC connectors in the back with Ethernet, and then ended up replacing a print system that took 2 hours to print a drawing on a plotter with about 40% accuracy. So usually it took 3 attempts for it to work, with a print system that now would print with 100% accuracy in 10 minutes. So long before the movie Office Space, one of the owners of the company and I went outside with an aluminum bat and hit the print modules through the parking lot for a couple hours with a bottle of whiskey. Anyway, so that's really what got me started. And after that, I thought, I should be doing computers more often. I worked there for a couple of years. I ended up working at a casino in Northern California as the IT manager there. Then I went to work for an internet service provider that a friend of mine still owns in Sacramento area. Then I ended up moving to New York, working in publishing in IT there, and then in legal, where I've been for the last 16 years.
Nice.
So I worked for a law firm that was, our office was down on Wall Street. It's interesting because, I have certifications, and I'm not a huge certification person, which is kind of ironic, but I think they're great if you're trying to illustrate to somebody that doesn't know you, whether or not you know what you're talking about. That's really what their use is.
Right.
And then, of course, it keeps you honest, right? Because you have to maintain them. But all my computer stuff is pretty much self-taught or through, training classes here and there and all of that. Never got a computer science degree. I'm actually in grad school right now getting my MBA finally, just because I thought it'd be fun. But it's interesting how we fall into computers, especially security. A lot of security people I know do not have computer science degrees. They have some other background. And my unproven theory about that is that you have to have a slightly different mindset when looking at security, because you have to be able to step outside of a system,
right,
and think not so much about the technology of the system and the code or whatever else. You have to step outside of it and think about methods, tactics, techniques, and procedures. If I wanted to break into this system, how would I do it? And in most cases, it's wetware engineering. I go after the people, but if you go to security events and you go to RSA, you attend B-sides, or you go to something like that, you'll see a lot of really good development and really solid, computer science being applied, which is, the underpinning of everything. But you also will find seminars on things like tabletop exercises, on just doing investigations, the methodology of investigations, things like physical security hacking, social engineering. And that's the kind of stuff I think that really interests me, and why I got so much into security was because I feel like if you're doing security, you're spending all your time trying to outwit other people.
Yeah.
So how do I build a system that is well protected against someone out there, an adversary who hopefully has the collective intelligence that's, smarter than we are,
Right.
Hopefully for them at least. And so how do we up our game to compete with that? And so I think that makes it a really interesting profession. I wish more people would get into it. We don't have nearly enough security people, but every time I go talk to kids, I try and get them interested. If I get 1 out of 50 in a computer science program, then I'm excited.
Right. Yeah, no, it's actually, true. It seems like some sort of a dark art from the outside, pretty intimidating. But you're right. Like, I've been speaking to so many individuals and encouraging them to also kind of consider, switching into IT security. A lot of the folks from desktop support actually also get into, or the first line there, the folks who pick up the phone, respond to tickets, things like that. They do a very good job getting in once they get into IT security, because they've heard the range of problems or solve the range of problems there, even the first level, second level, third level kind of issues. And then they clearly know, okay, so if this is the issue, this might be the problem. So they have clear ideas for what could break, and hence what the vulnerabilities potentially could be, and things like that. And they definitely have the customer service with the user-facing kind of experience. So you're absolutely right. It takes a diverse people of diverse backgrounds to come in and actually bring their collective perspectives to this field. And the more we can get, the more we'll take. Is currently the state of the world there. Yeah, do you recollect any pivotal moments? Any of those? Aha! This totally makes sense to me. This is why I'm here. Any of those revelation kind of moments? Yeah, during your journey, your career journey through the years.
Yeah, I would say, I don't know if it was a single moment, but back in probably 2006, I think it was, when I was in New York, we were rolling out laptops at the law firm I worked for then. And the couple of years before, I think it was, they'd been hit by Code Red, which is one of those early malware attacks, and didn't really hurt them, but it was able to do something, right? It was before I was there. And so they were like, we need to address this risk. How are we going to do it? And we got together, we said, look, the only way to do this is to lock down PCs. We should be running GPOs and enforcing user context, and we should be running a whitelist. Now, back then, this was a global law firm that pulled in nearly $1 billion a year in revenue. And imagine trying to convince people in all these countries around the world that we are going to lock them out, screaming, fighting. I can't do my job if you don't let me install software, blah, blah, blah. And so there was a lot of political wrangling back and forth. But then we ended up discussing with people and find out, it's not going to ruin your life if we do this. We are going to have to staff up and we're going to have to manage this. But we are going to use whitelisting. This is before PAM tools existed.
Yeah.
And so we ended up going from, trying to remember how many it was. I think it was like 8,000 or 9,000 apps in the environment, because we're talking probably 2,000 devices globally, just end user devices, and plus the VM environment. So make that about probably 3,000. Anyway, we scanned it all, but we determined there's so much of it was versioning of a piece of software, blah, blah. We ended up nailing it down to about 140 apps. And then by the time I left and came out here, it probably built up to maybe 350 to 400 managed apps over 5 years, 6 years. But it cut the risk down probably by 90 something percent. Because now when people clicked on stuff, it just couldn't install.
Right.
When I got out to here to Stoel Rives, we took it even a step further and started whitelisting ActiveX controls, browser plugins, to some degree scripts. It's hard you can't really do it with PowerShell, but Windows Defender for endpoint now does a really good job of detecting weird PowerShell scripts. We tested it out in a third-party pivot test last year. So once back in 2006, 2007, I realized how much we had to pay attention to the PCs, and that there were ways we could use technology more than habit or avoidance even to reduce these risks. I was like, this is a full-time thing. And I remember telling our law firm back then, this is going to be a big deal. You should watch out for cybersecurity. You're probably going to be doing a lot of legal work in this area. I wasn't the only one by any means, right? There was a trend in this. Nobody knows, this is baloney. Nobody cares. It's never going to happen. Then 2008 happened. The market crashed and we freaked out. And then people were paying attention to that. And then suddenly cybersecurity started popping up more and more in 2009, 2010. And by that time, I was focused on, even though I was still a network manager back then. When I came out here, 2011, it had really started gaining steam. And in a couple of years, I got security officer glued onto my title as a role, because I realized this is a full-time job. And now if you look at it, there's this, you look at Ubiquity, for example. I don't know if you're familiar with what's going on with them right now. They are probably in trouble. And within, I think it was probably 72 hours, there is an investor lawsuit.
Right.
Like, you said what? And so nowadays it's just every time a cybersecurity event happens, your company's reputation is at risk, your regulatory risk potentially. You've got angry customers, angry investors, the media. I mean, it's just, it piles on. And so now the impact, right? The potential impact, which, maybe 10 or 15 years ago was oh, we got hit with a sophisticated attack, and people would feel sorry for you and feel sympathetic and say, oh my goodness, the criminals got you. Like, I'll still shop there, right?
Right.
Over the years now, even if you do everything you can to prevent the attack and it really isn't your fault, and that's because it's a 0 day or you're a small company going up against a nation state, customers are a lot less forgiving now. And so the stakes are much, much higher. And so I think that's why it's become such a full-time job. I think working on those PCs back then was probably the point where I determined, you know what, this is only going to get worse.
Yeah.
Seeing the level, seeing some of the code, I got to tell you, so at our firm, we ban applications that have to run in local admin context. And I've had to turn away some big companies, say, nope, get your developers back together and fix this, because your app should not have to run in local admin context ever.
Exactly.
And so that's a big deal, because if you remember the whole what is it? I always get NotPetya and WannaCry mixed up in my head, but that application in Ukraine, right? The tax app that got compromised also had to run in local admin context.
Right.
So why, I'm sure the companies that had it, right, just install it on a PC, and in our environment, it would be no. Or if you absolutely have to have it, it's going to be a non-domain joined PC on its own subnet that doesn't connect to anything else, and you're going to, that's the only thing on there. And I'm going to put epoxy in all the network ports. So other than the one we're going to allow, right? Anyway, it's I know it's a long-winded answer, but it's it's a complicated question, right?
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, it's like, it's one of those, like, you really don't realize that that's happened till a few years later, and you think, oh yeah, no, that's what led me down this path. And in this case, it was the PCs that you were talking about. So no, I don't think it was a long-winded answer at all. All that context is useful because you gained so much valuable experience from doing that, which kind of shapes your current day decisions. So that's pretty useful and important. I'm going to just pivot slightly. I mean, what is some advice that you might have for kids in college now who are looking to make a career in information security, or even working professionals who are looking to transition probably into IT security? What would be some avenues and paths that you would recommend they take so they can be successful in their transition?
Yeah, first of all, I would say, number one, learn the frameworks, right? Like learn the NIST CSF, learn the NIST RMF, risk management framework, and understand just the nature of the framework, like why we do what we do, why incident response goes in a particular order, how you prioritize things, how you evaluate risk, getting away from that. I like to tell people every time I do a risk evaluation with a company, it's the meteor strike scenario. They hear one potential risk and they think, oh my God, our reputation is going to be in ruins. I'm like, now, wait a minute. We have to talk about the likelihood of this happening. How likely is it? Yes, that impact is terrible. But the biggest thing probably is, if you haven't taken community theater classes, you haven't done a lot of public speaking, if you maybe do improv, something like that, learn to be able to stand up in front of people comfortably, talk about things in a way they can understand. Because if you want to do security, sure, we can talk tech to each other all the time, but the business has no idea what you're saying. You have to be able to take everything and translate it into business terms for everyone else. You have to be able to talk to all the users using analogies, using examples that they can understand. I mean, it's funny, we think of spoofing, right?
Right.
I take a fake Gmail Yahoo address and I put your name on it and I send it to people and they think it's you, especially on their phone, because the real estate in the phone doesn't allow for the actual email address to be displayed, just displays the friendly name and you think it's you. That kind of stuff seems so simple to technical people. It takes me repeat after repeat after repeat to get people to get the concept of spoofing. And the reverse, I talked to somebody yesterday and said, but we had spoofing on our network. Like, what happened? Oh, well, our CEO's address got spoofed. I said, well, wait a minute. You mean you got an email that said it was from your CEO, but it was from Gmail? Oh, no, it was his email account. I was like, well, that's not really spoofing. Like it's impersonation. Because spoofing is fake, and you've got somebody in your CEO's email account that's more serious.
Right.
But that's just even those concepts. It's you can't. You have to pay attention to the little stuff, and so you have to practice and practice and practice. How do I convey this information to people in a way they can understand? So while you're focusing on the technical part of your career, focus on the soft skills, the people skills part, because it's really is going to be what makes the difference between being an engineer and an analyst and a manager and a leader. That's the difference. And if you want to be an engineer and analyst, that's great, right? Like, I mean, depends on what your focus is, but you can open up far more opportunity for yourself. I have a friend who is an engineer who manages a team of engineers now, never wanted to manage people, but still had good people skills, and has now basically, because of his people skills, become the manager of the engineers because he's the only one they trust at the company to come back and translate concepts to them.
No, it's an excellent point. I mean, I can relate to that from my experience. So when I got hired at Jensen, of course we're a small firm, and pretty much everybody wants to talk to somebody whom they're hiring, right? So so this was this marathon day of interviews, and I had 1.5 hour session with 2 board members, the CFO and the chief compliance officer, right? And I find out after being hired and all that, few months in, that they walked in thinking, okay, it's an IT director position, what are we going to understand? We're not going to learn, we're not going to know what's going on. We're not going to be able to understand the concepts, things like that. So they walk in, and I'm there explaining a few concepts here, and then immediately what happens is they start, okay, I didn't understand that. So I had to explain that in words that they understood. And a few weeks later, I find out that they hired me, or they put in their vote for me, because they're like, okay, I can actually understand what this guy says. So that's really, really important to, I can't stress enough on that.
And I think if you end up managing a team or managing people, you have to give them some free rein to, approach things in the way they think is right, learn new skills in the job, that kind of stuff. I mean, security positions, it's tough to maintain people in a position unless you give them a lot to do and you make it really interesting and you make it fun to some degree. If you keep things too static, or you, I guess, oversell the idea. So for example, we have an IT department. I don't have any security people right now. I have one I'm kind of training up, but I don't need them. I've outsourced it to a managed security service provider to do most of the grunt work. And we have on our IT team, especially the ops team, which I used to manage before I started doing this full time anyway. So I leverage them for a lot of stuff. And many of them could honestly, if they decided tomorrow, like change their title to security analyst, security engineer, probably even security architect for a couple of them. They've taken the time while being a networking server systems person to learn the security as well, and kind of keep a very wide skill set and lift that whole skill set up. And by having that kind of multi-dimensional skill set, you're even more valuable. And how do I keep these people, right? Well, it's because when they come to with an idea and say, here's how I want to secure the system, I don't come back and be prescriptive and say, you're going to do this, this, and this. I'm going to say, these are the requirements we have to meet. How you do it is up to you, right? You're the engineer, not me. So I think people really appreciate that. It's like, no, I'm not going to tell you how to do it. You're going to tell me how to do it. And I'm going to go vet it and make sure it meets all of our requirements. And so, with our whole thing is, doing it the right way, getting it done on time, and doing it within budget. Other than those 3 tenets, fair game, right? Like, you're the person we hired to do this job. You tell us how to do it.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes total sense. And the earlier point about, hey, I mean, know your stuff, right? That goes without saying. Yeah, just understand what your frameworks are. Read up the NIST white papers, the guidelines, the framework, and CSF, RMF. All that stuff. Know what you're working towards. and then figure out a way to communicate that in language that the board understands, because that they are the folks who are going to let you work on these projects or not,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're the ones who are going to tell you what's really a priority and what isn't. So we are a Windows Hello shop now. We're fully, 502 Windows Hello compliant. We are using biometric plus DPM with also a PIN option. You can still use a password, but what's the point? I mean, it's so much easier to use my face. At the same time, like, how did we get there? Well, it took like probably 2.5 years on the back end for us to, first of all, get devices that all had TPM. Second of all, build out the necessary tools in the cloud for us to do it, because of course we're also managing our devices, whether or not they're connected to us. So as long as they're on the internet, we control them. So you don't need VPN for that. But the reason we got there is we would ask for users, what's the biggest pain in the ass? And one thing people would complain about is, I'm typing that ridiculous password that you requirement. We actually do a passphrase requirement. So it's really long and has all sorts of interesting complexity forms to it. And so people were like, first of all, I can't, I can remember this one, but it's a pain in the ass. And then once I log in, I connect to VPN, I got to enter it again. Why do I have to do that? And so that's how it started. And so we started going back and forth on this. And so now, once I authenticate, I just have to click to connect to VPN because I'm already using my credentials. We're using conditional access, device profiling, embedded certificates, all this other stuff to remote control, multi-layer manage our devices. But that project just got kicked off by, I have this interesting idea of how I can fix this problem with customers. And we let the engineering group go with it. And in their spare time, they spent a lot of time, making sure they did it right, requiring, coming back to us saying, what, if you want to do this, we need to get into Azure. What, we need to do this, we're going to have to get this slightly different licensing program. And I want to stand up these servers, and I want to build this environment. And then I want to connect these things together. And now I want to, and so over and over. But the cool thing about it was the engineers come to us and say, this is what I want to do. And instead of us saying, okay, we're going to, do the old way of management and set this metric, and then we're just going to, manage a project week to week. And no, it's like, here's our skunkworks lab on the left. You're going to come up with this. And then once it gets to a minimum viable product stage, then we're going to start focusing on it, putting more money in it, really getting it into the project stream and everything else. Our IT director, Adam Nelson, could talk quite a bit about, running through development cycles in a more agile way, and how we, manage projects, and how we keep from prioritizing the things that really aren't a priority and really trying to focus on the things that truly are.
Right. Yeah, no, makes sense. I mean, I have a similar philosophy. I mean, I just say, fail fast, fail quickly, and so small iterations, that totally makes sense. Yeah. But to your point, I mean, IT security really is just, as most departments like to view it, they think of IT security as a group that tries to deter their work and things like that. But I always try to say, no, we're making sure that we help you, we're alongside you, and just help you do things more securely and safely. So just be more of a partner in that sense, as opposed to somebody who gets in the way of them getting further along. That's great. The one last question I have for you, we can't get off this this topic without talking about newer technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, Bitcoin. We've been hearing a lot of lately. So, do you have any thoughts around those? How those will impact this field and things like that?
So it's funny. There's blockchain is a great solution looking for a problem to solve. It solved one, right? Digital currency, but how can we apply it to other things? Like, I still don't understand why we have to notarize physical documents. I mean, you could use blockchain to replace the whole notarization process. And I think there's it's just that it's sort of like IPv6, the technology is awesome, but it's slow to adapt. Or if, an email, right? DMARC, right?
Yeah.
So if people have done it, even though everybody should be doing it, we're doing it. Um, I think some of those technologies, they're great ideas, but either they're not being used enough, or in the case of AI, it's being overused.
Right.
Um, I don't know that some people get the difference between machine learning and AI. And
Yeah.
I've seen so many examples where machine learning is being called AI, right?
Yeah.
You're feeding the
Yeah.
machine a bunch of examples and it's correlating the examples out, and versus an algorithm that can make independent decisions. Um, and even with AI, it's all the AI we're doing is weak AI. I mean, it's super valuable. What I mean by weak is, strong AI would be an Android, like
Yeah. Yeah.
thank goodness we're far
Exactly.
from that so far. Skynet's hopefully not on the horizon.
Right.
I think what I would like to see more is taking the AI mindset and applying it to like data leakage prevention. Those are solutions that I was long skeptical of. I can't tell you how many presentations I walked out on in
Right.
the early days of that stuff. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. But because there's too many false positives. But now it's gotten better. And the key about data leakage prevention is it needs to warn you ahead of time while not
Right.
interrupting the flow of your business. And
Yeah.
that's the big challenge, because so far most of the stuff I've seen is either the incident already occurred and we're letting you know something got leaked so you can prevent future leaks,
Right.
or you have to program it so that you need to approve before these categories of information go out. And so imagine at a law firm where we send out confidential stuff via email all the time with clients,
Right.
and in a secure manner, but it contains that data. A DLP analysis is going to flag constantly, like, yep, this has a social security number. Well, we have a whole private client practice. Of course, it has a
Right.
social security number, but we also have a peered TLS connection. So, I think more effort in data leakage prevention is really necessary. I think just keep developing more accurate models. One thing I've been looking at lately has been really cool is a new product that people are working on here in Portland that's designed to try and better map vulnerabilities versus things like CVSS scoring, which CVSS scores are valuable. I mean, any metric's valuable. The problem is that what's that metric in my environment? If the thing's got a risk of 9, but it
Right.
requires local admin context, well, guess what? Right? It's
Not
not a
happening.
me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a big problem. I think we'll see. Like, we get audited all the time, of course, and the auditors will come in and say, show me that you've patched all your high vulnerabilities. And my response is always like, in what context? Like, we've patched all the vulnerabilities that are high to us. You might
Right.
find some, this one vulnerability isn't patched yet, but we've already mitigated it with compensating controls or by removing the capability in the environment. But you're referencing the CVE database and I'm referencing our actual environment. So a lot of time we end up just patching all the highs just to do it, even though they
Right.
wouldn't be a risk for us. We'll do it anyway because you just don't want to be bothered in the audit.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No,
So
that
more
that
advances
all
there.
makes sense. Yeah. Just going back to the whole blockchain thing. I'm an identity access management guy from years ago. So for me, I mean, and again, I mean, data privacy issues and things like that can be very well guarded with blockchain, especially in the identity access management context. Like, all if the context switches to you manage your identity, and for instance, walk into an organization, why join their Active Directory network? Your identity, you kind of uh, the system can actually check to see if it's Rama, and then assign attributes to you to say user employee of Jensen and things like that. So it turns it on the head a little bit, but I feel like there will be a lot more applications like that where you walk around and then when you leave, those attributions or attestations just go away. Things like that. But again, more to come there, I guess. And to your point about yeah, with AI and machine learning, there's a huge confusion there between which is which, and people use those terms interchangeably. A lot of the progress in those areas is around RPA, I think, lately, and that's where just to check a box, a lot of people are doing that as well. So, yeah, no, all very valid and meaningful comments there. I agree with you. A lot more can be done on the DLP side. I'm struggling with some of that with Office 365, trying to put DLP rules around Teams, and it's like putting a fence around something that's so amorphous and so fluid that it just yeah, it's not that easy. But yeah, it's something. It's an area where these kind of newer technologies, especially artificial intelligence, machine learning, can help a lot.
Well,
Uh,
going back to what you said earlier too, don't interrupt the business, right? Like, so
yeah,
we had the same problem with Teams. Everybody wanted to use Teams, but Microsoft sometimes is not the best on developing governance for their environment. So what we did with
exactly.
Teams is we link a tab in Teams to our document management system. And if you're an internal team, you can share documents all you want with that system. And we
Right.
have a 90-day retention policy on everything in Teams because we can't create another repository that could end up being unmanaged. We just can't. We have way too
True.
many regulatory and client requirements that we have to meet. So we can still use Teams, though, with outside parties. Like you and I can have a Teams call,
Right.
but I just can't share documents with you on Teams from our repository. And if we share a document on Teams, it's only going to live in there for 90 days unless I file it where it belongs.
Right.
So there's I think back to that earlier point too, it's check yourself when you're in security. Every once in a while I'll go back to stakeholders and say, hey, am I saying no too much, just to get a no, you're good, like, because I don't want to be the guy who says no. I just want to be
Yeah.
the person that says we can do that if we
But
can meet these other requirements.
yeah,
And that's
exactly.
sometimes the problem. We find out we can't meet the other requirements, and then of course, right, it's risk management. Doesn't mean you can't do it. You
Right.
go back to the stakeholders, not you. The cybersecurity head cybersecurity person should not be making the risk decisions. You should be identifying and contextualizing the risk, making a recommendation on how to treat the risk, but the organization has to make the final decision.
Yeah.
So we could still decide to accept the risk and do it anyway as an
Right.
organization. The key is that you knowingly decide to do it. And that's the difference when you have, I think, a good security program and you don't have a security program, is you know when you're making decisions that are risky,
Right.
and you're tracking them and you maybe stop doing them, versus an organization that says, well, this is so inconvenient, I'm not, disabling the ability to write to removable media, to heck with that. And then you make that decision, then you don't really understand the risk and something goes bad later.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. That makes total sense. Yeah. So identifying risks, calling risks out, and contextualizing them it is really the key, and then let the firm make the decision. So essentially, the IT security person or the department or the leader there is playing more of a consultative role on a day-to-day basis, saying, you know, yes, we can do this, but think about these things. No, we should not be doing these things, but we can do these. So my life is between the yes but and the no but. I mean, there are no absolutes like yes and no, but yeah, no, totally on the same page there as well. So we're pretty close to the hour here. So any closing thoughts? Any closing comments?
Yeah, I would just say, cybersecurity, if you're looking for an area where there isn't a wall at the end somewhere, sometimes you get into a field and you feel like, I've learned everything, now I'm bored, I got to go do something else. Cybersecurity is just like many other areas of computer science or just
Right.
any application of science, right? There's always more to be done. There's always something around the corner. Quantum computers, when those finally get here, are going to upend everything.
Right.
If you're not already trying to get out ahead of, replacing your passwords, please try, because they're not going to be viable for much longer.
Exactly.
Things like, even social security numbers. I just tell people, I just assume all social security numbers are compromised at this point. Doesn't mean you should tell your social security number to everyone, but you don't want to be a LifeLock guy. But at
Right.
the same time, don't run around through life thinking that it provides you any form of protection.
Right.
And I think just always think ahead. How would I proactively beat the bad guys at something like passwords. Okay, you can use MFA. Well, what if they can get my MFA? Now, how am I going to beat that? Well, I'm going to stop using SMS. Then, well, the Iranians have done a good job of stealing people's tokens with fake websites. So now what do I do? Well, I better train people on how to look at websites. It just goes on and on and on and on.
Right.
If you're on this side, bad guys are on this side. They are well-funded, probably more well-funded than you are, and they're highly motivated. Exactly. So if you find that, exciting, I would say cybersecurity is a great opportunity for you, and you should definitely think about it.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more, and couldn't have said that better either. Yeah, the bad guys are funded. They are, more importantly, very highly motivated. Just anecdotally, about 12, 13 years ago, one of my colleagues at Columbia spoke to me and said, you know what? There are these quote unquote hackers that go into these big buildings, offices located in these nation states where they just do this. They try to get into American servers 8 to 5. Literally that's their job to do. They have been sponsored. They get paid like you and I get paid. And I was thinking he was just just being like the man who cried wolf, but turns out that's all real. I definitely believe him more now than I ever believed him before. So the motivation is there. The people are knocking. We just have to be smarter and we have to be careful. Yeah. No. This was great. Thanks again, John, and I appreciate it. I'm sure our listeners or viewers who watch this or listen to this are going to learn a lot, and I couldn't thank you more for your time.
No problem. Thanks for having me.